everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're just going to take a couple of seconds to let people in because I know that connections can take a little bit of time. Rachel, you're a little bit frozen. Are you there?
Yes, I am here. Um,
Fantastic.
you look a bit well. This could be okay.
I think it's going to be fine. I can see you. Okay, that's great. Um, Amazing. Okay, so I guess thank you so much, everybody, for coming. While everyone's coming in, we'll just do a bit of an introduction to this while we wait for everyone to get here. But I guess, yeah, we just wanted to say thank you so much, everybody, to coming to this webinar. I know that Green Loop's changed a bit since we first started. I think back then it definitely felt like there wasn't really a public place in the attractions industry for sustainability. And 6 years ago when we started it, that was the case. But now I think it started to change, and we're really proud of the role that Green Loop's played in putting sustainability on the agenda. So we're really pleased about that. I think as well, post-pandemic events have also changed. I know that it feels like millions of events and conferences happening nearly weekly, I think, and it's a really big ask to expect people to take time out of their day to join a conference, especially a 2-day conference specifically about sustainability. So that's kind of, I guess, what we saw over the last few years of doing Green Loop. And also, to be honest, it's really challenging to stay positive in light of current events, shall we say? Meeting online once a year, but maybe seeing each other at conferences during the year. It made sustainability a really isolating place to be, we felt.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we definitely felt it as well, didn't we, Ruth? So
Yeah.
yeah, so we just decided to change the format of Green Loop to make it instead of just an annual sort of big thing into something monthly, so we could keep in touch more regularly. So we're doing so this. I'm sure you've seen, or some of you've seen the monthly newsletter, and then also doing this webinar series, which is the first one of those. And the idea is to kind of share positive updates and inspirational stories on a more regular basis, so that we nurture this like wonderful community that we've built up over the years, of everybody who really do care about sustainability in our industry. So the monthly newsletter, I think Ruth's going to put a link into the chat if you haven't got it already. That we're trying to do that. We try and give a dose of kind of positive news from around the web. We're not trying to greenwash. We're just trying to focus on positive stuff, I think, both within the attractions industry and kind of adjacent as well, and maybe some odd book reviews too. And we've had loads of really, really kind messages and feedback from people about the newsletter. So please sign up if you'd like to know more, and give us a shout if you've got any ideas of what else we can put in it.
So we've got the newsletter, but we've also got these monthly webinars, and we're hoping that these are going to give us a space to learn more about projects in depth, founded from an idea that most of us can hopefully take something away from. I think what's really amazing about Green Loop and what we love about it is that it's really cross-sector. So, the session today, you might not work at an aquarium or an electric company, but hopefully you're going to take a lot away from our speakers today. And also added to that, we've hopefully got the space that we can connect and check in with each other afterwards, which is something that I think a lot of us need, especially if your colleagues might not care about sustainability in the same way. So with this in mind, welcome to our very first Green Loop webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today, and for trying to make a difference. Rachel, I'm going to take you off screen now. And I'm going to bring in our amazing guests who are absolutely making a difference. Let me bring them in. Um, I have with me, who are hopefully going to be joining momentarily, Dr. Deborah Luke, who is Senior Vice President of Conservation at the Florida Aquarium, and Stanley Crowe, who's the Senior Manager for Land and Stewardship Programs in Tampa Electric's Environmental Services Department. So Dr. Debbie and Stanley are going to be giving us an insight into one of the world's most unique conservation collaborations, which I was lucky enough to visit, and I can say it really is a fantastic facility. Anybody in Tampa or the wider Florida area, please do go and check it out. And then when they're finished, we're going to have a bit of a chat. So feel free to put any questions in the Q&A tab, and then we'll jump into some breakout rooms and catch up properly. Debbie, Stanley, I'm going to leave you to it. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'll be back soon.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to share my screen for you here. And here we go, I think. So I want to thank everybody for joining us, Stan and I, today. As the introduction alluded to, this is for a lot of people, an unexpected collaborative conservation partnership, a company, an electric company, and a public aquarium that's a nonprofit organization based on conservation. But it's a really important partnership, and we're really excited to be able to share that with you today. So I'm going to turn it over to Stan. At this point, he's going to take the lead, and I'm going to follow up afterwards. We may have a few comments together in between, but take it away, Stan.
Thank you, Debbie, and thanks everyone for this opportunity. We're both really excited to share this experience with you. And the partnership really started at least 20 years ago, but really it started maybe even before that. And it's because of the Manatee Viewing Center at our Big Bend Power Station, which is on Apollo Beach. We discharge cooling water to help cool down the power plant equipment. And as you can see in this photo here, that attracts a lot of manatees in the wintertime because that's a species that is very sensitive to cold. And if the temperature drops below 68 degrees, the water temperature drops below 68 degrees, they can actually start showing signs of cold stress. And this past winter, we had some unusually cold weather in the Tampa Bay area, and the water in the bay got down to, I think it was 51 degrees. So quite a bit colder than manatees are actually able to tolerate. And so that attracts them. And literally, we've had 1,000 and more at one time. So it's a really phenomenal thing to see. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. So this is a graphic that shows what the whole campus looks like. The Florida Conservation Technology Center is a little over 500 acres in size. And at the top there, you can see it's anchored to the north by the Manatee Viewing Center. And at the south end, you can see it's anchored by our partners, and that's the Florida Aquarium, which has the fish out. I'm sorry, they have the Sea Turtle Hospital and the Coral Care Complex where they're doing some really groundbreaking research on corals. And then our other partner there is the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and they have a fish hatchery and a youth conservation center. And then there is one more partner, the University of Florida, that is doing various research projects on site as well. But you can see that the campus is mostly left in its natural state. So there's some really nice coastal habitat there. Very little of that is left around the Tampa Bay area. And we have the whole site connected by nature trails and boardwalks. There's a 50-foot high wildlife observation tower. So folks can really truly spend an entire day out here if they want to visit the campus. So a little bit more about the Manatee Viewing Center, and this is one of my favorite shots. This is an aerial photograph, and you can see just how many manatees congregate there. We're open from November 1st to April 15th, and we're open 7 days a week in most holidays, except really major ones like Christmas and a couple more like that, but pretty much year round, or I'm sorry, 7 days a week from April 15th. Sorry, from November 1st to April 15th. We have free admission and free parking. And we've had over 10 million visitors since we started. And by the way, in December, we're going to be celebrating our 40th anniversary. So that's a major milestone. The slide here says 1,100 manatees on peak winter days. Well, actually, when that official count was done, there were a couple hundred more manatees just at the mouth of the canal that the scientists think were either just leaving the canal or getting ready to enter the canal. So probably the count is closer to 1,300 manatees there at one time on that one particular day. So really phenomenal numbers. And the number of visitors we get, that's also a phenomenal number. Some more shots here of the Manatee Viewing Center. You can see in the upper left-hand corner there, we have a viewing platform that's out over the water so people can get really close to the manatees. You can't see it in this photograph, but we've actually added a second viewing platform at the other end of the canal because where the manatees are is really dependent on tides and which units are discharging warm water and things like that. So sometimes if the manatees are at the other end of the canal, we have another viewing platform down there so folks can get close to them still. You see a boardwalk there that actually goes out to the wildlife observation tower I mentioned earlier. That's about a quarter of a mile long boardwalk, and then it goes to a 50-foot high observation tower, and that goes through some really nice mangrove habitat. And by the way, if you're thinking we blitzed through mangroves to put that boardwalk in, we actually did not. It's adjacent to a creek that was dredged decades ago, and the spoil from the dredging operation was piled up where this boardwalk is now. So the boardwalk went over these former dredged spoil piles that were covered with Brazilian pepper, which is an invasive species here. So we actually did some environmental enhancement when we put this boardwalk in. And then the bottom photograph there, that's just an inside of our education building. So we have a variety of exhibits, and it's geared towards different age groups. So there's some exhibits that appeal to toddlers and some are more adult oriented, but there's really something there for everyone. So again, as I mentioned earlier, we opened in 1986, so 40 years, and that's really what attracted our partners to this site. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. I mentioned this earlier, manatees come to the Manatee Viewing Center because of the warm water. So anything below 68 degrees, they start to get cold stressed. Next slide, thank you. Just south of the Manatee Viewing Center, we've also added a clean energy center, and it's open the same time that the Manatee Viewing Center is, so November 1st through April 15th, same hours. You can see the days we're closed there. It's only Thanksgiving Day, Christmas Day, and Easter. And this year, we will be closed Easter, but some years Easter falls after April 15th. So we're really then only closed 2 days out of the year. And again, admission and parking is free. At the Clean Energy Center, we just showcased some new and emerging technologies for renewable energy. So it's just another feature on the campus that's open to the public. Some of the technologies we have there, we have flexible solar panels up on the roof. There's also a parking lot solar array. We have a supercapacitor, a wind turbine, a flow battery, and also a smart flower. And then, of course, there's all kinds of educational signage, as well as typically a docent would also be on site to help explain some of these technologies to our visitors. We also just recently completed a 500-foot living shoreline project. Where we're located is just north of Apollo Beach, and Apollo Beach is one of those waterfront communities that were developed back in the 50s and 60s when they thought it was a great idea to come in and dredge canals through mangrove swamp and other sensitive habitat to create additional waterfront property. And of course, everyone that comes to Florida wants to live on the water. But because of that, you have this network of canals with virtually vertical banks that really don't provide any habitat at all. So we came in and you can see there, we smoothed out those vertical banks and also added some shoreline stabilization and then added some native habitat. So now instead of this straight canal with vertical sides, we have a more meandering creek type effect that's going to have a variety of habitats that will greatly enhance wildlife habitat, but also it provides learning opportunities for our on-site education programs as well. Another thing we've done is we've recently completed planting 3 acres of seagrass. As you know, manatees, or you probably know, manatees primarily eat seagrass, and they eat 10% of their body weight every day in seagrass. So it takes a lot of seagrass to keep, say, a 1,500-pound manatee well fed. And just south of our canal there, where the manatees congregate in the wintertime, there's a large area there of shallow water. There were no seagrasses growing there, but it looked like it would be ideal habitat to grow seagrasses. So we've worked with a couple of a not-for-profit and also a company to plant 3 acres of seagrass there. And if those are successful, our permit allows us to plant an additional 2 acres. So the nice thing about that is if it's successful, the manatees will have a nice food source just adjacent to the discharge canal where they congregate. and they won't have to leave and travel such long distances when the weather's cold to get the food they need. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. So again, this is just the slide again that shows how everything is laid out. So it was again because of the success of the Manatee Viewing Center that we were first approached by the Florida Aquarium about doing something on this campus. They saw how much land we had, they saw the success of the Manatee Viewing Center and really wanted to capitalize that. The other driving force was that the Florida Aquarium, their main campus is in downtown Tampa, and so they're landlocked. There really isn't space to expand there. And even if there was, it would be prohibitively expensive because downtown Tampa has become a really hot real estate market. And so it would be really hard for a not-for-profit organization to come in and do anything there. But there's also other reasons like quarantine and things like that that makes more sense to be in a location like this and not in a downtown campus. Next slide. So I mentioned one of our other partners there is the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and they have a fish hatchery. They're going to be spawning redfish and sea trout, and their goal is to produce 1 million sport fish a year. So that's a really ambitious undertaking. And the fishery is pretty much complete now, and I think they should be in operation later this year. So that's a really exciting milestone. Next slide. And then, as I mentioned earlier, they also have a Suncoast Youth Conservation Center. So it's all geared towards youth programming or youth education. And the really great thing about this is that they get a lot of inner city kids who have really never really been out in nature before. And so they get to go kayaking, they get to go fishing, they learn archery, all kinds of wildlife discovery. It's just a really wonderful opportunity. And by the way, they have a summer camp program that typically sells out within 10 to 15 minutes of going online when they open up registration. So really, really popular. Next slide, please. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to Debbie because the rest is her programming.
Awesome. Thank you, Stan. So I'm going to go back one slide and just show you that picture of the young boy with a fish in his hand there. If you look in the background of that, that is our the Florida Aquarium Sea Turtle Rehabilitation Hospital. And you can see the ramps going up there. So I just wanted to kind of show you that from the distance. But one of the things, that we thought about when we partnered with TECO on this property, Stan pointed out a lot of the benefits, right? The downtown Tampa being so expensive, not being able to actually do field conservation and expand with that. But also this whole opportunity with TECO has been just a lifesaver in the sense that we can partner with everybody right there on that same property, right? I think we pay a minimal lease for this, like $1 a year or something like that. And we're open to the public also. All of those facilities that he just mentioned are open to the public between November and April during manatee season when it's cold out down here in Florida, free to charge. And so oftentimes groups and families that may not have the ability to see some of these things will come down to this center and just spend the whole day there, and it's really fabulous. In addition to that, what Stan didn't really brag about is TECO itself as a company is elevating the bar for sustainable energy, not only with the conservation work that they're doing on their property, as he showed you some of those things, but also reducing their coal usage and switching to solar and using the sustainable practices that we all have heard about. So partnering with an organization that raises the bar for others to raise the bar and follow is just a no-brainer for us at the Florida Aquarium. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about our Center for Conservation there. As I started talking about the sea turtle, we mentioned our facility in Tampa. So you'll see there at the top is our Tampa main aquarium where guests come in. You'll see even in the back with partnership again with TECO having solar panels on our roof there. And then the bottom pictures are our Apollo Beach campus. That's adjacent to the TICO Center and part of their overall property there. And on that, we house our Sea Turtle Rehabilitation Center. That's the building on the bottom left. And then our Coral Conservation and Research Center, which you see one little tiny piece of that on the right, but it's quite expansive. So a little bit about us, the Florida Aquarium, both campuses. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization that is dedicated to saving marine wildlife. We have 4 broad conservation priorities. You can see those on the right. Safeguarding imperiled wildlife. Within that falls our coral conservation program, which is very comprehensive and wide-stretching, as well as our sea turtle conservation program. But we also have a lot of other things that we work on, such as African penguins and turtles and different land-based turtles and so forth that we work on. We also focus on generating healthy habitats. So we have quite a bit of mangrove restoration that we do. Stan talked about some of that, the importance on the property of the mangroves that are on that property there, as well as seagrasses. Reducing single-use plastic consumption as well as pollution. We have a lot of different programs and projects that focus on that within both campuses, as well as advancing our own business operations in a sustainable way. So we have a lot going on with that. We're going to focus more on the sea turtle and the coral conservation programs for today's webinar, but happy to talk to you about any of them at any point. So let's talk about sea turtles a little bit more. At our Apollo Beach campus, we focus on 5 primary areas. We have a 5-year plan that is adaptively managed. And our main focus is rescue and recovery, rehabilitating animals that need to be rehabilitated, not only from Florida waters, but also from New England and other parts of the country when they need to come in. Reintroducing those animals back into their normal habitat if possible, and then conducting in-field research and, of course, our collaborations. We couldn't do any of this without that. So just to give you a little bit of information from Florida, our rescue and recovery, locally, it is typically either entanglements for sea turtles, sometimes red tide affects sea turtles that will go out and rescue animals, boat strikes, typical things you would hear for sea turtles. But most of our turtles actually come in from cold stun. Yes, in Florida, it does get cold, and we do get cold stunned animals, manatees and sea turtles. Oftentimes in the early fall, when we open up to the public, we are getting turtles from New England that have been cold stunned. And then later on in January, February, we will get turtles at cold stun, usually from the east coast of Florida, that come to us. These are often chronically ill turtles. They've been cold stunned and just sitting there for quite a long time in the water, and become malnourished and have secondary problems. So they're often in our care. They come in our care as the most critically injured or ill sea turtles, and they will stay within our care probably for 4, 5, 6 months at a time before they can be released again. So it is quite a long process to do that rehabilitation with these turtles. Last year, we had, I believe, 67 turtles in our care at one time, which was quite an accomplishment. And we reintroduced almost every single one of them back out into the wild, which is another amazing accomplishment. We conduct research with a lot of those turtles by putting satellite tags on them. One of the things we don't know, and there was a data gap on these young juvenile turtles that strand in New England from cold stun and then spend 5, 6 months with us in our care. And then Fish and Wildlife regulates where we release these turtles, but oftentimes we will release them on the east coast of Florida. So they're relatively young, 2, 3-year-old turtles. We're stranding in New England, released off of Florida's coast. What do? We don't know that data. So we'll put the satellite tags on and track them. And most of the time we see them just hopping right back on the turtle trail and migrating the way turtles do. So pretty cool research from that. But we also do in-water health assessments for the turtles here around the Florida coast, where we partner with Sea Turtle Conservancy and others, and we'll go out and we'll catch turtles in the wild. We'll bring them on the boat. We'll do a complete health assessment and re-release them right there. And that gives us amazing amounts of data about how the turtles in our waters are dealing with their environmental conditions and what's happening out there, which is often like a canary in a coal mine, right? If the turtles are we're seeing malnourishment and other things, that's an indicator of other things going on in the environment that we can then address. We'll also do that kind of research in Costa Rica and Bermuda and other places with partners. And then finally, and what is the basis of all of this is collaboration. You cannot do conservation without collaboration in today's world. The problems we face, and those of you that are on this webinar, I'm sure you recognize this, problems we face today are too big for one organization to do it alone. We have to be able to enable each other and lift each other up in order to make the biggest impacts. So that's an overview of our sea turtle program. I'm going to talk a little bit about our coral program now, conservation program, which is really quite fun, and talk about technology and moving fast. Corals all over the globe are facing issues right now. Florida's coral reef is what we started focusing on here at the Florida Aquarium. Back several years ago, there was a big die-off of corals along the whole reef from a disease called stony coral tissue loss disease. It affected almost all the corals on our reef. In the last several years, to top that off, the waters have gotten much warmer in the summer, spring, summer, and that has also had a horrible impact on the corals. So we now have some species of corals that are considered literally functionally extinct on the reef. They're so far apart that, again, corals are a living animal. They're not stones, they're not rocks, they're a living animal. They eat, they reproduce. When they do spawn, their gametes are so far apart that they can't come together and fertilize. And so there's no little baby corals being born. So we actually partnered with a researcher I think you've all talked about before, Jamie Craig at the Horniman Museum, who had been able to replicate conditions with Pacific soft corals. And we wanted to do that with our Caribbean hard corals. So we tweaked everything and changed things and did a lot of experimenting, and we were able to replicate the conditions in the Florida Keys for a whole year in a laboratory environment, all computer controlled, including moon phase, including light length of day, lumen level, salinity, temperature for a whole year, because corals will only spawn once a year. So that's it. Talk about reproductive success here. That's really challenging when you only spawn once a year. So we were able to replicate the conditions in the Keys, and we were able to spawn pillar coral several years ago, which is one of the biggest coral building corals there is, and reef building corals there is. And that was a huge success. I mean, amazing success in the laboratory. And at this point now, several years later, we are now spawning reliably 14 different species in our laboratory, which is really amazing. Considering if you want to help with assisted reproduction with corals in the wild, you would have to go out on a dive boat, scuba dive, put a tent over a coral head at night, once a year, try and catch the gametes, get back on the boat, put them together in a lab, try to settle them. It's a lot, it's dangerous. Now we can replicate that in a laboratory environment. We have so many corals that are broodstock. We've done all the genetic testing for those corals, so we know which coral is who, and we can put corals that we want to breed together in the same tanks for the course of the year, and then when it comes spawning time, we can make those little babies that we want to reproduce. We've also been able to partner with those in Honduras, the same species of coral, and those corals are much more tolerant to warmer waters. So now we're breeding Honduran corals with Floridian corals, making Flonduran corals, if you will, and successfully making babies with those. And we've already outplanted those on the Keys to see how they do, right? Because all of this is relatively new. But what it enables us to do, as you see on the rearing picture there, is help create thousands, literally millions of larvae, thousands of baby corals. Then they have to grow up, right? So we partner with a lot of organizations that will grow those corals out. And then we can start outplanting them back on the reef and measuring them and monitoring them to see how they do on the reef. So now we've created this whole chain pipeline for corals to go back out on the reef, again, with collaboration and with partnerships and with ongoing research. We've partnered with the University of Florida, a lot of Nova Southeastern, a lot of universities that are actually doing thermal tolerance research on this too. So really exciting opportunities for both sea turtles and corals, all because of this partnership that we wouldn't have been able to do without TECO and this property. So just to give you a little overview of some of the accomplishments, I'm not going to read through some of these, but this is just last year in itself from the Florida Aquarium, some of our impacts that we've made. And you'll see right there on the very top for coral conservation, this is the next phase that we're going into. We're not stopping what we're doing with our coral program that I just talked to you. We're actually expanding and building a brand new classroom that working with Fish and Wildlife and the other agencies, people from all over the world will come and learn how to spawn corals and rear corals. But we're also launching our IUCN Coral Center for Species Survival. There's only 32 centers around the globe for IUCN centers right now. And we are hosting the only global coral center, which is really exciting. So we're happy to be launching that, moving that forward. I talked about some of the other accomplishments we've had, but you can see through the numbers there, 2,500 Flandrin corals, how many thousands, hundreds of thousands of larvae and settled corals are sent to our partners. So we can only do that because of the ability to have the space to breed the corals. Same thing with sea turtles. We had 75 went through the program last year. That's a lot of sea turtles that we're working with. And then some of the other areas that we focus on for our other conservation priorities, such as healthy habitats and sustainable operations. I do want to touch base real quick. Stan and I had talked about this. We just recently, we had had this open before and had to redo it. I'm going to turn it back to Stan to talk about this, but this is a really unique opportunity between the Florida Aquarium and TECO as well. Do you want to touch on this one, Stan?
Sure, thank you. So this is back at the Manatee Viewing Center. We have a Cownose Cove. It's a raised touch tank, very, very popular with our visitors. And it also points back to this unique partnership we have with the aquarium because Tampa Electric owns the tank and all the life support equipment, but the aquarium owns the animals and also provides veterinary staff and educational staff on site. So again, really, really popular. But what happened is a couple of summers ago, we were hit with back-to-back hurricanes. And with one of those hurricanes, which was Hurricane Helene, we had a lot of storm surge with that, and the entire site was under about 5 feet of water. And so that swamped the touch tank and also took out pretty much all the life support equipment as well. So there was a lot of discussion that, the aquarium was reluctant just to put everything back the way it was because we just don't know when we're going to get hit with a hurricane again. But after a lot of negotiating, it was finally determined that we were going to put the tank back in because of how popular it is with our visitors. Another reason the aquarium was reluctant to continue things the way they were is this population of rays used to go back and forth between here and the baseball stadium. So over in St. Pete, where the Tampa Bay Rays play, they have a touch tank there as well. And so the Rays would be over there for baseball season and then come back to the Manatee Viewing Center for manatee season and then go back for baseball season again the following season. And that's pretty stressful for the animals. They have to be captured. They're put in tanks on the back of a big panel truck and they have to slosh back and forth across the bay over to St. Pete. And so it is a lot of stress on the animals. So I said, well, why not just leave them at the Manatee Viewing Center year round? And that's what ultimately was decided on. And that's really exciting for us because even though the Manatee Viewing Center is closed in the summer months, as I mentioned, there's summer camps going on campus all summer long. And so we're going to open that up to the summer campers, but also let other camps in the area and schools know that this is available by appointment. And so people will be able to enjoy the rays year round. So it's a really great success story that I think benefits both Tampa Electric company visitors as well as the Florida Aquarium. So thanks, Debbie, for the chance to share that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, if any of you've worked in this field, you know how rewarding it can be when you see families and children's eyes light up when they're seeing the local species right here, whether it's the manatees or the rays or the crabs in the mangrove forests or whatever the fish that they're learning how to sustainably fish for. It's really amazing. So I'm
Yeah,
going to
we
close
see,
out.
I was just going to mention that we have families, we see local families that come there every week with their kids
Mhm.
just to enjoy the raised touch tank. So it's a really popular feature.
I think we're going to close out now because I think we're running out of time here. But in closing, what I really wanted to say is, this is an unusual relationship, typically, to have a power company and a nonprofit conservation organization partnering together. But I'm hoping you can see not only what we reap together and share with our audiences by sharing the property and the technology moving forward, but also recognizing that every single one of us right now, by virtue of being on this webinar, is a consumer. We're using energy to be on this webinar, right? We're all consumers. We just have to figure out how to be consumers in a better way. And that entails collaboration, and it entails collaborating with companies and corporations that are trying to raise the bar to do things in a different way, in a more sustainable way. And so for us at the Florida Aquarium, we are very proud to partner with TICO, and um, we are grateful for their ability to give us the property that we need in order to make all the accomplishments that we've had. So all of us working together, raise the bar, partner with others, raise the bar together. That's all I have to say right now.
Thank you so much, Debbie and Stanley. That was really fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much. Am I right in thinking that the seagrass plantations have to be protected from the manatees because they eat them too quickly? Is that? I seem to remember there being lots of coverings over the seagrass when I saw
Can
it.
be a problem, and it depends on the species of seagrass because some species, manatees, are likely to pull them out by their roots, and so then they won't regenerate. But we used a
Wow.
couple of species that are not like as likely to be uprooted, and so we're hoping that if this is successful, the manatees will just eat the tops off the grasses, but then it'll grow back just like your lawn does when you mow your lawn. That's the hope,
Okay.
anyways.
Yeah, I guess they eat so much, don't they, that
Yeah,
they're
like I
very,
said,
yeah, they come to you
10% of
hungry.
their body weight. Also, a 1,500
Yeah.
pound manatee eats 150 pounds of seagrass a day, every day.
That's incredible that you're trying to provide that for them. I think it's not an easy thing to do. So yeah, thank you so much. So I think we have a few questions from the audience, but I did want to just kind of start off. We did a pulse survey recently, which was basically asking leaders in the industry what their kind of confidence was in the next 12 months. Obviously, we did this before recent events, but there you go. And we had 54% of our leaders said that they felt the industry needed to do more to combat the impact of climate change, but 34% actually said they didn't know enough to have an opinion either way, which we thought was interesting. So I know, the centre and the campus that you have educates like you've educated millions of people and guests over the years, but what can we do to educate our leaders that aren't necessarily engaging?
Good question. Do you like me to
That's a
start?
tough one
Sorry.
because there's so much misinformation out there, some even coming from our own government. So that is quite a challenge.
Yes.
There's
Yeah.
so many climate deniers out there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really, what do you think, Debbie? Is there anything, I don't know, is there any strategies you think can help?
It is interesting. No matter what time era you live in, there's always going to be pros and cons for any of those things. There's going to be people that are naysayers and then the ones that are really on the extreme of the yay sayers kind of thing. Right now in the US, I think we're really struggling a little bit with that. But what we end up doing is just continuing the work that we do. We absolutely believe in the effects and impacts of climate change. We're seeing it. We're seeing it in the water temperatures every year. We're seeing it. I think the public is starting to see it more and understand it more by
Yeah.
the impacts of weather and hurricanes and especially in the United States, tornadic events that are in the Midwest, more wildfires. Things are becoming more apparent. You know, what we predicted a long time ago is now actually happening. So people
Yeah.
are saying, wow, okay, maybe there is something to this. From the policy standpoint, as you say, Florida Aquarium, and I'm sure TICO has their own policy advisors and so forth. We have relationships with all of our Congress people. We go to Washington, D.C. every year. We share what we're doing and the work that we're doing. And we try to focus, particularly right now, we focus on what the issues are and what we're trying to do to address them and looking for support, funding, and bill support to help with those things. We don't necessarily go down the path of you have to do this because of climate change. We go down to here's a reef issue. It's because of the
Yeah.
warmer water, and here's what we're doing.
Yeah.
It's
I think
kind of
making it,
adaptive management, adaptive messaging at the same
yeah.
time.
I guess making things more easily relatable as well. So instead of saying, "Oh, it's climate change," like you said, making it, the waters are warmer, there's less fishing, there's less X, Y, Z. This is what we can do. I guess that's
Mhm.
much less political, isn't it?
Mhm. Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Yes, yes. We've got a question from Venetia. So thank you, Venetia, for joining us. So as master planners, we often work on blue sky concepts where clients are reluctant to include sustainability conversations at the onset, especially in entertainment and experience design. So could you please share the origin story of the collaboration? Was it mandated by the city zoning plan, or was it initiated by a private or not-profit organization? Great question.
Yeah, it is a great question, and it definitely wasn't mandated by not by a city zoning plan or anything else. It really was the aquarium seeing the success of the Manatee Viewing Center and knowing that we had this vacant land just south of the Manatee Viewing Center. And so they first approached us. I bet it was probably 20 years ago at this point, and we started having conversations about what a collaboration would look like. And as it got closer and closer to coming to fruition, we did a lot of things to improve the property and make it more accessible for our partners and visitors as well. So, for instance, there's a creek that bisects the campus. It's called Newman Branch Creek. And the Aquarium was concerned about how walking visitors would get from the Manatee Viewing Center down to the south part of the campus where their operations are. So we put in a really nice bridge over Newman Branch Creek. It has both a pedestrian lane and a lane for golf carts as well. We increased our parking because there was not enough parking to accommodate additional visitors. And then we've added a fleet of solar powered electric golf carts.
Oh,
So for
cool.
visitors that don't want to walk or are unable to walk, they can go into overflow parking, which is in the middle part of the campus, and get a ride up to the Manatee Viewing Center or go south over the bridge down to the where the aquarium and our partners have their operations. We also added a saltwater well. Both FWC and the aquarium have a daily need for salt water. And so we put in a saltwater well so they can pump salt water out of the ground. It's not appropriate for some of the things that the aquarium uses, but it still has a lot of usage and it saves a lot of money.
Mhm.
Wow.
And there's other things we've done as well, but yeah, it was completely voluntary and it was originally suggested to us by the Florida Aquarium. And they approached us and we thought it was a great idea. We saw the benefit to both organizations. And even though it wasn't mandated, of course, we had to go through lots of permitting. And even when you think you're doing something that's for the public good, you still have to jump through all the permitting loopholes, which could be
Yeah.
quite frustrating, but we persevered
But you
and
made it.
we did it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow. And actually, going on from that, so I'd be really interested to know your kind of, I know it's a common question, but your key lessons. So, what were your top tips for people who might want to forge their own unexpected partnerships? Is there anything that you do differently? What is there any kind of, yeah, what are your key takeaways from the project 20 years down the line?
Debbie, I guess I can start it and then you can fill in anything I miss. I don't know that we would do anything differently. I think my best advice would be to just be patient because clearly something like this doesn't happen overnight. We had at least 5 years of serious talks before we even got to the planning phase.
Wow.
So definitely allow a lot of time for permitting or for planning and then permitting after you have your plan in place. It's going to take a while. And just don't be intimidated by the cost and then just some of the site challenges as well, because we're here in a coastal habitat and where it's prone to flooding, as you heard with our experience with the raised touch tank. So all the buildings had to be elevated up out of the flood zone. And like I mentioned earlier, we had to figure out how to provide salt water to the site and lots of challenges, but they're all overcomable and you can have success in the end.
What about you, Debbie? Anything from the aquarium side that you think what could you recommend or suggest?
Yeah, I think part of the question I believe I heard was starting a relationship with another partner who might be reluctant to talk about sustainability or that. And I think one of the things that Stan and I do and our organizations do every year is once we get past April 15th and we close down to the public, we reassess, right? We look at what worked, what challenges we had, and every year we get more and more people that are coming. We haven't actually advertised the campus, like, and done marketing for it in any capacity. So
Wow.
it's like they learn and they come and now they're swarming. And that's good. It's a good problem to have in a
Yeah.
way. It's also it means we have to adaptively manage. And so having those conversations and being able to talk about those things and being nimble enough to switch to what we need is really important. I don't know, I wasn't here when we did the original conversation. Stan was here. But I know with a lot of other partners that we have at the Florida Aquarium, and we have a lot of them with other corporations and other nonprofits. And some are willing to talk about and want to focus on sustainability, and others don't want to touch that word right now, or don't want to
Yeah.
touch the climate change word right now. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But again, you can frame it in the way that you need to, right, in those partnerships. So what are the objectives and the goals? And that's probably the most important thing, is to figure out what each partner wants to get out of that. And you don't have to say it's sustainability. You can use other terms, right? And you can use other reasons that will have a sustainable outcome, but you could still frame it and start the conversations that way. And oftentimes some of those things are financial, have financial benefits. So if you switch from this product to this product, you're going to save money over time on energy or other ways, right? And then you see that savings and you reinvest it into other objectives that will help you move forward in that. So I think reframing is probably a really important tool to think about, and being open to each other's needs and what you want to get out of the partnership.
I think that's a really big lesson for me with this particular project is that I would never have considered that an aquarium and an electric company would have had such a good I think Debbie, when we were talking about it, you kind of called it a symbiotic relationship, and it really is because you both benefit so much from it. It's such a good partnership, and it's not
Absolutely.
something that I would have really ever thought about. So I'm one of the hopes for this webinar actually is that maybe we can think of some more strange partnerships that maybe not strange, but I think it's a really inspiring project. Thank you so much. One more question, and then we'll go into breakout rooms. And Debbie, I know you have to go. What's next for the Florida Conservation and Technology Center? So I know it seems like you're kind of constantly adding new things. Like you said, you're reassessing at the end of each season. What are your next plans apart from the Coral IUCN Center? Go on,
For
Stan, you go first.
Okay,
I
Sandy.
know one thing that we've been in conversation with the Florida Aquarium is about the possibility of having a manatee rehabilitation center on site. Um,
Wow.
I think both partners would love to see that happen, but that's a really expensive project as well. I think the last estimate I heard was $5 million. So,
God.
you have to have some really large tanks. You have to have specialized veterinary staff on site, but it would really be phenomenal. And the other thing that would be cool about that is then visitors would then be able to see manatees year round if we had manatees. And not that we want manatees in rehabilitation, but the sad
Yeah.
fact is there will be. And so, even though we're not open to the public in the summer, we do have summer camps and other groups that do visit in the summertime. And so it would just be a really great opportunity.
I guess manatees are quite a lot bigger than turtles, aren't they?
Yeah, they
Just
are.
slightly. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I would say the same thing. It's something we've talked about several times, but it does entail a lot of financial backing for that. So
Yeah.
we have the property, we have plenty of property to put what we need. But manatees are very expensive animals to feed. It's not seagrass, it's romaine lettuce, and it's the best romaine lettuce. And
Oh,
they're 80, like 5 cases a day of romaine lettuce.
God.
And that's a lot of food. So it's
Yeah.
food, it's staff, it's the veterinary staff, it's the animal care staff that needs that. There is definitely a need. Fish and Wildlife regulates all manatees, and like many of the other species we've talked about, they do strand because of cold stun, but also for red tide impacts. There's a lot of
Oh,
issues going on with manatees, and there's a need for, if you will, bed space for manatees. There are several places that focus on critical care, much like we do for sea turtles. We get
yeah.
probably critically injured and ill sea turtles. There are facilities that focus on critically care manatees, but there is a need for bed space for those manatees that are not critical, but still are not ready to be released back out into their habitat, and just need to either grow out space or time to recover space. And that is something that what we would be looking at is something like that. And what Stan didn't mention also on that property up by the Manatee Viewing Center is a really nice area where a lot of rehabilitated manatees are re-released back out into the wild right there on the
Oh,
property.
wow.
So it would be really nice to have them go from a critical care facility to a halfway house, if you will, on our property and then be released right there. So that would be
Yeah.
makes sense, but it's a nonprofit organization. We need financial backing to help us with that. And it's
Yeah.
something we look at, but we're not quite there yet.
TBD then.
Yep.
Yeah.
But if anyone on this call has $5 million they would like to
Yeah.
contribute,
Yeah.
please
Do
call me
reach
later.
out. Yeah, that
We'll
would
put
be
your name
great.
on top. There you go.
Oh, well, Debbie, Stan, thank you so much for joining us. This has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for um, coming to the webinar. I'm going to put everyone in breakout rooms. There's some questions that I'll put in the chat for you. Debbie, I know you have to go. Stan, we'll see you in a breakout room. And thanks again.
Thank you.